Hi, my name is Athena. Welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for being here. Today I want to talk a little bit about sobriety. I just celebrated 5 years of sobriety on June 18th. I guess that was almost 2 months ago, but I've just been reflecting a lot on what has happened in the last 5 years, and since sharing more about my journey, I've also gotten a lot of questions about recovery and sobriety and what my story is. So I figure it's time to start sharing. It's time to start answering your questions. So to start out, I thought it would be fun to share with you guys some of the things that I've been reflecting on over the last 2 months and sort of break it down into 5 things that I've learned in the 5 years that I've been sober. And a lot of these are also things that I wish I would have been told before getting sober, or at least in early sobriety. First on the list, it's going to get worse before it gets better. Unfortunately, this is just the reality, at least for me. Removing drugs and alcohol from my life was very intense. It was very intense, and especially in the early stages, not only are you going through major physical changes as your body readjusts, but there's a lot of mental and emotional changes as well. I think that's why, early sobriety can be so difficult. It's the combination of the physical and the mental and emotional. The good news is that it does get better. It does get better. And I think that it's important just to ride out that wave. Ride out that wave, let the emotions come, let yourself feel them. At least for me, I really had to just allow myself to sink into the place that I was at, no matter how, for lack of a better word, shitty, no matter how shitty it was. I just had to let myself feel it. Which leads me into the second thing that I realized. I really have just had to let myself grieve the loss of alcohol. And for someone who doesn't struggle with addiction, this might be a confusing sentence and not make a lot of sense. But for me, it really was like my first love, my one and only, the thing that was kind of there for me through thick and thin. Friends came and went, relationships, but it was always there. And removing that from the equation really did feel like losing a loved one. And once I started shifting my perspective and looking at it as a grieving process, it helped me a lot with the emotions that were coming up. The first stage of grief being denial. I was in this long before I even decided to get sober, mostly just in denial about my ability to control my drinking and usage of other substances, telling myself that, I can just do it on weekends, or I could just do it on holidays, and creating all these boundaries and rules for myself just to end up right back where I started. So that delusion and that denial happened for many years. Then I got sober, and then came the rest of the stages of grief. So I definitely experienced depression. I found myself sleeping a lot, eating a lot, very sad, crying a lot. I had waves of intense anger and resentment. I was mad at the world, my parents, myself, people for normalizing this. Every billboard with alcohol on it pissed me off. The old person crossing the street too slowly pissed me off. And then there was the bargaining stage where, after a couple weeks or a couple months, I would tell myself, you know what? Maybe I could drink again. Maybe I could just have one. But then came the 5th and final stage, which is acceptance. And I remember at the beginning experiencing little bits and pieces of acceptance, of like this sense of serenity and gratitude to be sober, and understanding of what alcoholism is, and grateful to be a part of a community of people in recovery. And over time, the amount of acceptance slowly increased. And just like grief, just like with anything else, there's times when that bargaining pops back into my brain even 5 years later, and I might be out and I'll be like, a drink sounds really nice right now, or what if I could just take a little bit of mushrooms? So it is interesting watching the grieving process play out in real time with something that's not a person, because that's usually the context in which we hear about the stages of grief. So that is the second thing that I've learned, is that it is a process, and looking at it from that point of view, that it is real grief, has helped me a lot. Third on the list, a lot of your friends, I'm gonna hold your hand while I say this, a lot of your friends aren't actually your friends. And don't get me wrong, I kept a few friends from when I was in active addiction. I have a few childhood friends that I absolutely love and adore. But the reality of it is when I got sober, I would say 98% of the people that I communicated with and hung out with dwindled off from my life, and that is totally okay. That is totally okay. I didn't really realize that the only thing that we had in common was partying, and that the only time that I would hang out with these people for the most part is when we were smoking or drinking. When that was taken away, there was just not that much in common, and that's all right. Fourth, addiction and alcoholism look so different between different people. Like, for so long I thought that it could only look like bottom of the barrel. Like, I would stay in my denial by comparing myself to people that I would see, you know, struggling on the streets, or, you know, they don't have a home or a job or a car, or they just look generally disheveled. Like, I had this image of what someone who struggled with alcoholism and addiction looked like, and it was like the worst image you could imagine, and I kind of held on to that, and I'm like, well, I'm not that. I didn't get there, so I must not have a problem. And that was just part of the denial process for me. But now, having been sober for 5 years, I have met so many different people from so many different walks of life who have struggled with addiction and alcoholism, people who have been very financially successful, you know, ran businesses successfully, and seemingly on the outside had completely normal lives. But the reality was that they were far from normal when it came to drinking and drugging. So it just looks different. It looks different for everyone. And it's a good reminder for me never to judge a book by its cover. And we all have our own traumas. We are all struggling with our own things. And you also don't need to wait for your life to get like that to seek help and to get sober. Like, I got sober at 21. I definitely, you know, I only was out there using and drinking for 7 years of my life. And it definitely could have been a lot longer. I could have died along the way. I didn't lose everything, but I know for a fact that I was going down that road, so you don't have to let it get there. The fifth thing that I've learned is that life is so much more full sober. I think that I had this other misconception that it would be boring. I just couldn't imagine like not drinking or doing things, going to music festivals and doing crazy things. I don't know, I just thought that it would be so boring and empty, and I just couldn't really imagine it. And now that I've experienced it for 5 years, I can very confidently say that that is so far from the truth. I was using alcohol to cope with all sorts of emotions, you know, good and bad. If I had a good day at work, I would celebrate with drinking. If I had a shitty day at work, I would cope by drinking. And, you know, someone died, I drank. Someone was born, I drank. It didn't really matter. There was no in between, and it didn't leave a lot of room for really experiencing life on life's terms and the fullness of emotion, both good and bad. So I can dance now. I can have fun. I can do whatever, and I don't need something. I don't need that liquid courage. I can just be myself. I can be authentic. I can connect with people without doing powders in the bathroom. If you gain anything from this, you know, maybe you can relate, or maybe it's just some more insight into alcoholism and addiction, but I've just really felt called to share more about my journey, and I've been getting a lot of questions. So if you have any other questions that you want me to answer, I'm happy to answer them. I'm an open book. But yeah, those are 5 things that I've learned in the 5 years that I've been sober. And if you're struggling, just know that you're not alone. There are many free resources out there for you. I'm going to include a couple links below to some of those free resources. And again, if you have any questions, my messages, my comments, everything is always open to you. And with that, thanks for watching, and I hope you have a beautiful and blessed rest of your day. Bye.